One of the things that drew me to the film is that almost fantasy, sci-fi, horror, but it isn't quite any of those things. It's leaving your imagination up to it. And it gave me a lot of Twin Peaks almost vibes.
It's a fear of something that isn't personified in like a monster or a werewolf or something like that that's in horror. And then it's also got moments that are really, really funny. It's like a weird little genre on its own, outside, like at the back of a street, and it's all boarded
outside.
up. And sometimes like you have a peek in there and you're like, oh, shall I go in? You go in and you're like, yeah, I shouldn't have gone in there.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, definitely.
Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Flixwatcher podcast. Today I'm joined by Ms.
Hello.
Sophie.
Hi there.
And Helen.
Hi.
And we're talking about Killing of a Sacred Deer.
Thank you as always to the mighty people for the mighty, mighty tunes. And thanks to Ben from Rockwood Audio for his awesome editing skills.
Please do remember to write a review and rate us on Apple Podcasts and anywhere you can do where you listen to the podcast, because it really does help us.
And you can join in the conversation with us on Twitter
At FlixWatcherPod and on Instagram
at Flixwatcher. Hello film fans, welcome to Flixwatcher podcast. Our guests today are Ms. and Sophie. Over to you, please, Sophie, to tell our listeners a little bit more about who you are and what you do, please.
Hi, I'm Sophie. I am the acquisitions manager for a podcast network called Auddy. Come and check us out, auddy.co. And I basically look after all the amazing podcasts on our network, including the incredible Flixwatcher.
Thank you very much for having us. It's been a pleasure to join the network. What brought you to podcasting in the first place, and bringing them onto the platform? What kind of things do you look for in the podcast to bring them to Auddy?
I think I just look for just passion for a podcast and commitment to making it. I think we're not particularly, chasing, what's the word I'm looking for? Like we obviously we love to work with big hitters, but we are particularly, happy to work with lots of different types of creators and podcasters. And that's what really interests me about doing it and working across Auddy, is because I just love working with podcasters, love podcasts, used to make podcasts many years ago myself. So yeah, I just enjoy that process and discovering these shows and bringing them onto the network.
You used to make podcasts. That sounds so sad.
Yeah, well, I won't say the name of the podcast because God forbid I do not want somebody to hunt it down, because it was a dating podcast from like 2016, and there's some stories on there that nobody needs to hear. And so I started in it, and then I was working music at the time. I started a podcast plugin company, which was helping match talent with podcasts and things like that. And then, it just ended up progressing into kind of acquisition and that side of things, and came to work with Auddy. Love their kind of ethos, what they're doing, the way they want to kind of change the landscape and make kind of the monetization and marketing aspect of podcasts available to everybody. And so here I am doing my sales pitch.
And you work with Ms., who's in the top left-hand corner of my screen. How are you doing, Ms.? Who are you?
I'm good. I am Senior Marketing Manager at Auddy, so working closely with Sophie. And I also currently on pause, a podcast myself called Promote the Hell Out of It, where I talked to musicians and anyone who had an alternative lifestyle, but had now had to focus on actually running a business, for tips on how I could have a productive life while still doing the things I loved.
Were there any top tips that you can take away that you can share with everyone who's listening now, and myself, because I need to know?
I mean, top tip was probably reading The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, because you can literally highlight bits in there and write email templates that you can use for different situations and stuff. That was probably the tip that most changed my life.
One of the key tips on that was basically get a VA from somewhere like the Philippines and pay them a half decent wage.
I picked and chose what I used from that. I didn't use everything, but I think it was more the outlook of what was possible that I found helpful.
Tim Ferriss is a very successful podcaster as well, so there you go.
Well, exactly, yeah. I mean, inside baseball, we do have a VA from the Philippines who helps with our posting and is very good. Stephen, thank you very much for your help over the past few years. It's been genuinely saves myself and Helen so much time every week. It's beautiful.
Wow,
and that was
amazing.
taken from Tim Ferriss's book. So I agree with you. 4-hour work week is definitely useful. But we're not here to talk about Tim Ferriss or other podcasts, or 4-hour work weeks will be more productive. We're talking about films here today. You've chosen Killing of a Sacred Deer. Can you tell us first of all why you chose it, Miz? And then I'll get the timer in which you'll have 60 seconds or less to give us the synopsis.
The reason I chose Killing of a Sacred Deer is firstly because I like a lot of his other films. And secondly, because I
By
think...
that you mean Yorgos, the director?
Yorgos, the director, yes. Well, I like a lot of the actors too, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But I like Yorgos' other films. And I find this is the film that is really divisive, which makes for really good conversation, because sometimes that you can pick things out that a film that everyone loves doesn't quite bring to the table or the pub.
Okay, and your 60-second timer starts now.
Okay, so this is about Stephen Murphy and his family, Anna, young teenage daughter Kim, and young boy Bob. They seem like a pretty perfect family. He is a surgeon, and he makes friends with a boy called Martin. He starts taking him under his wing, but things start to go from bad to worse when they find out that there's a bit of a sinister agenda for Martin coming into his life. That Stephen had been part of the reason his father had died, and things go pretty wild. I think I'll leave it there so that we can discuss everything that happens. I think that's part of what the film brings to the table, right? The fact that it's quite open to interpretation after that.
Well, let's talk about Yorgos' other films. He's got a few Greek films in Greek. Helen, you wanted to jump in there?
Well, we've had the lobster on here before. That's his we've had.
That was your minute timer there.
I beat it to
smashed it.
Yeah, the lobster. The lobster's probably my favourite. I have watched a couple of his others, Dogtooth, The Favourite, and Alps, which I did watch, but I can remember very little about.
So you've seen all of them, haven't you?
I think he's got quite a few more. I think he's got quite a few more, but maybe in Greek.
The short film Mimic, that was on Mubi. I think it probably still is on Mubi as well. I've only seen his main ones.
His main?
Yeah, like Dogtooth, The Favourite, The Lobster, this, and Mimic. I haven't seen his early ones.
What about yourself, Sophie?
I think I have seen Dogtooth. I don't think I've seen... Everyone says I need to see The Lobster, and I've never seen it. And that's The Lobster. It's lobster, isn't it? Not The Lobster. It's not a seafood restaurant. They've said that I need to see it. But yeah, I watched it again yesterday just to brush myself up on it. I've seen it a couple of times, and it just... I have many things to say about it that kind of freak me out and also make me be like, I don't ever need to see this film ever again. It's one of those films that like you either like that type of director and that type of film or you don't. And I think I sit very much on the other fence of it. So good on Miss for bringing it to the plate, because I never would have chosen it.
You've shown your hand there as to the repeat viewing score, potentially. Yeah. I think, The Lobster is definitely lighter than this, although it's not really a heavy film. It's quite a heavy film in itself. So if you can handle Killing of a Sacred Deer, I think you can definitely handle this.
Okay, good to know.
The Favourite is definitely more, I think I would say more accessible.
It's mainstream,
it's less
isn't it?
kind of... You're sorry?
It's more of a mainstream film, and even then that's saying something if that's more mainstream.
I have seen The Favourite. What is... I'm just
Olivia Colman won
about.
her Oscar for it.
Yes, I have seen it. Yes, there's a scene in the bed with I know that famous scene. Yeah,
the station looks like a badger.
Yes, I've definitely seen that. Yeah.
So so that's, I can understand that. That's kind of a nice entryway into people, and depending on how people respond to it, do you say maybe try The Lobster? Then see how people respond to Lobster, and then say, okay, maybe you're ready for Killing of a Sacred Deer. But you've just gone straight into Killing of a Sacred Deer.
Mainly because it was the one that was on Netflix.
Sure. And we've done Lobster before, so you couldn't have had that.
Yeah. But
this film is it's pretty wild and dark. But one of the questions I put to the team beforehand was, is this a horror? Any thoughts?
I would say not in the traditional sense. There's no jump scares. There's no real obviously there is it's never discussed, but there is an element of something weird or supernatural or witchcrafty going on, obviously, with what happens to the kids. So I don't know. I think it's more like a dark, menacing kind of film noir thriller thing, maybe. I'm not sure. Like, again, one of the reasons when I can't put something in a box, I don't enjoy it. So I can't categorize it. I find it really uncomfortable. I'm like, I just want to know what it is. That's where I am. Well, so yeah,
dark menacing thriller thing is one of the categories in Netflix. So that's
okay. That's good to know. Good to know. Me and the algorithm, we're great. We're lined up. Good to know.
Where are you, Helen? This?
I'm not sure it's a horror. I kind of think it would probably align a little bit with like Michael Haneke's films, and I think he's like a genre in his own. So yeah, it's that weird unsettling of something not quite being right, but not being scary and kind of like a typical. It's a fear of something that isn't sort of like personified in like a monster or a werewolf or something like that. That's in horror, and then it's also got moments that are really, really funny. So it's like a weird little genre on its own, outside in like a weird dark cupboard, like at the back of a street, and it's all boarded up. And sometimes like you have a peek in there and you're like, oh, shall I go in? You go in and you're like, yeah, I shouldn't have gone in there.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, definitely.
Yeah, I think it has parallels with almost like a psychological horror, but in like the story it's telling is almost like the Greek tragedy, with again elements of that very dark comedy and introspection on like a theme, and it goes so deep into that theme. And I think it is almost his way of doing dialogue that adds to the unsettling nature, along with the music that Sophie and I were talking about before the conversation. I think those things almost give it an element of horror, but if you just analyze what happens, it's not really a horror film in itself.
Well, it kind of follows Colin Farrell's characters. It's, guilt, it seems, whether he wants to admit it or not, pulls him together with Martin. And that kind of spurs a relationship on. But like you say, Sophie, there's some, I don't know whether you want to call it supernatural element or just creepiness, but that kind of comes out left field. The fact that suddenly Bob can't walk. And then Martin, Barry Keoghan's character, just says, well, this is what's going to happen. All you people are going to die. You need to choose one. And by the way, it's going to get progressively worse until one of them dies. And then I think the first time I saw that, I was like, wait, have I missed something here in the setup that's kind of leading this way? But then, no, you've not missed anything. It's just like, this is how it's going to be. And it progressively kind of gets worse. And then I think the reason I was talking about the horror aspect, I think it's potentially the most horrific part was the bleeding eyes. And then, having to determine which person in your family you want to kill, which is both horrific, but also tinged with comedy at the same time, is spinning around with a blindfold on, shooting a gun, which is what a way to finish a film, I guess. But yeah, I felt there was definitely horror tropes in there. I felt there's brooding and there's menace, I think is a great terminology to put in there, but I'm not sure where the menace was.
There's a tiny bit of it that leans ever so, I mean, like you're talking 3%, 5%, that almost leans towards a bit sci-fi as well. Like some of the way it's shot up, the set up, the shots, the kind of like, there's lots of kind of, isn't there, kind of sci-fi movies that you never really see the monster. It's just kind of there, or whatever the science fiction is based. So there's an element of it I remember when I first watched it, I thought, is this a weird, creepy sci-fi film? Is there going to be aliens involved that are going to, it's that kind of thing? Because until it's revealed kind of halfway through what's happening and what the plot is, you don't really know. And it could go that way. And I think that's quite interesting.
That's one of the things that drew me to the film initially, I think, is that almost fantasy, sci-fi, horror, but it isn't quite any of those things. It's leaving your imagination up to it. And it gave me a lot of Twin Peaks almost vibes of things that get said. And it's like, is there something odd about this? But it's not obvious in your face like fantasy or witchcraft.
Yeah. That's it. It's not, no one's got wings or anything like that, or no one's casting spells.
They're my favourite films.
I think with Barry Keoghan, I think is a really interesting antagonist in this. And initially you just feel sorry for the guy, but then you just see this kind of brooding menace to the extent that when he's eating like spaghetti, you're like, this is something not right with this guy. So, yeah. Go on, Helen. Barry Keoghan as Martin.
I mean, I love him in the films that I've seen. And the spaghetti scene is one of my favourite scenes because he's talking about how he thinks like this eating spaghetti was like a really special way because his father ate spaghetti like that. And it turns out it's just the way that you eat spaghetti. It's just great. And I don't know what it is about it that I like it. I think that the second time watching it, I just think it's a really fascinating film about a man who's so in control of his life that suddenly one event happens and suddenly he loses kind of like all of the control in his life, and it's kind of like left to him to regain control, but in a way that he doesn't want to do it. And it's just great, like watching him have this kind of like really weird meltdown, particularly like revolving around hair, where like he threatens Bob that like if he doesn't have a haircut, he's gonna cut off his hair and make him eat it. And then there's a scene where he's searching the kitchen for the pubes and he's showing off like his armpit hair because he's been told that his armpit hair is considerably more than Martin's. So there's just and he's also like an obsession with like having lovely hands, which is mentioned throughout. So yeah, there's lots of uneasiness, but also absurd kind of weirdness happening.
Yeah, it's said a couple of times, isn't it, where Nicole Kidman has to pretend she's under general anaesthetic for him to try and have sex with his wife, who is Nicole Kidman, and it's a very strange, like, you're kind of thinking to yourself, he's obviously a man who's so involved in his work and it means so much to him that it physically bleeds over into his personal life and into his fetishes or kinks or whatever he has as well. So that's quite interesting, I thought.
What did you make of the kind of Yorgos Lanthimos of it all in terms of, would this work, do you think, if it was a standard delivery? How do you think it would be perceived? How do you think you would have taken it if it was a standard delivered in the way that any other film maker would have asked you to do so?
I'm sure there'd be riots from the Daily Mail, probably.
I found the dialogue, the dialogue and the way that they acted is just really disturbing. This is the whole thing about me finding the film really uncomfortable. So I was saying to Miss, that and the music are the two things that I find very uncomfortable. I don't like high-pitched strings. It just, at random places, just upset me, just my ears. So like, I thought that dialogue, and what's really interesting is, because I was watching it again for like the third time and I knew it, I was looking for points where I felt they ever so slightly broke that like kind of monotone, non-emotional dialogue. And I think there is a point when Nicole Kidman breaks it slightly, and I think it's when she's talking to him about taking the kids home, I think it is. And I can't work out whether that is a slip up by her as an actress or whether that was maybe put in to be a very small bit of emotion that she showed, and then obviously it reined back in. But yeah, and it's really interesting because obviously Martin speaks like that as well. And I think there was, and I think maybe, and I think there was a comment on Twitter, wasn't there, about it? I read that one of your guys reposted when you asked questions and said, like, were they representing him as being like neurodiverse kind of thing? And so was that a play on kind of, did the director decide to be like, well, everyone's going to speak like this, not just him, because I don't want people to think that is, part of the reason he is how he is, which I thought was really interesting. I thought when I saw that comment, I thought, but everyone kind of speaks in what you would call maybe a non-emotional tone. So yeah, I thought that was quite interesting.
I think with there's another scene where Colin Farrell drives to his house, Martin's house, and like threatens him. And I think that was slightly outside of the standard delivery there as well. From the reserved aspects of things. I mean, even when like Alicia Silverstone's throwing himself at him, he's still kind of got that. No, I don't want your pie. I'm going home now to be with my. There's no emotion kind of in that, apart from the fact he's just like, I don't want to be here now. Yeah. So I think that's quite interesting. You're saying about looking for those moments where it does veer from the norm, the standard set within this film.
And there's a scene as well, isn't there, where the daughter, whose name I can't remember, when she goes down to the basement and he's tied down there and she's like, you've got to try harder. And she is obviously a bit more emotional then. And I don't understand that scene. I'm like, what, try harder at getting her dad to decide who to kill or so she can get on with her life or die? I was always wondered with that bit when she was down in the basement talking to Martin. I was like, what's that about? What's she talking about?
I thought that part of that deadpan delivery on both sides adds an element of ambiguity as well, because I know that the instant thought from, I think, everyone here is that Martin is like the villain, but actually the whole family and Colin Farrell's character is pretty like messed up and like not quite right. And I think that if the delivery was more obvious, you could draw parallels to a lot of the almost anti-hero films that are revenge films on taking it out on someone that's caused you pain. And I think that ambiguity where you're not quite sure, you don't really like anyone in that situation, they're all kind of messed up, leaves it a more even playing field for having those discussions about it.
I think definitely there's some kind of revenge aspect to it, isn't there? I think that's a fair point there. And, you know, Nicole Kidman, as she's trying to uncover what happened and why their family's is at the centre of this horrible to be tragedy, she's asking, were you drunk? Did you have a drink before operating on this guy? So there's definitely a history there that's kind of unpeeled with that and a family history there that's not quite right.
I was just going to say, on villains, then, like, is Martin actually the villain? Because actually you could argue that it's Stephen's the villain. He was the one who killed Martin's father, and he was potentially drunk when he was operating, and that this really is it anything Martin's doing? Like, could it not just be like karma or his fate that for that decision he made for that? And I also think about the languages, it's kind of like that world building thing. So, you know, everyone kind of speaks like this, so you know that you're in the world of Yorgos, and it's all like a bit weird and it's a bit strange, and everyone speaks like this, and they're obsessed with what sea level your watch will go down to, and that's a completely normal thing to have a conversation with. In the same way that in sci-fi films, people wear like certain outfits, or like the planets look like a different way. It's just a little bit of world building into his weird and slightly deranged world.
Let's head to the scores, guys.
I'm Helen O'Hara, film journalist, author, and host of Women vs. Hollywood, a new podcast from the Stripped Media family. We're exploring the fall and rise of women in Hollywood, from the silent era to the present day and into the future. Each episode, I'm joined by 3 or more special guests to discuss the challenges that women face in the film industry and look at what we can do to change the picture. We've got actors, directors, producers, writers, academics, film experts, you name it, they're all here to explain what's going on in Hollywood. Search for Women vs. Hollywood now, wherever you're listening to this, and come join us.
So welcome to the Flixwatcher scores. All of our scores are out of 5. If you want to add decimal places, you can, and we will start with you, please, Ms, with your recommendability.
I am going to give it a 4. Recommendability. Do I explain why, or is it just scores?
You know, give us a little nugget of what you're thinking for.
Mainly because I think it's a film that people will love or hate and have something to say. Like, they will have something to say about it. So I think in that sense, I'm not saying they'll love it, but they'll definitely have an opinion about it.
It's a provocative film. 4 for provocability. I don't know. That's not a word. Recommendability isn't a word either. But we're gonna get it into the dictionary one day.
It is a word.
Sophie, your recommendability score.
I'm going to say 2.5. Because I feel like, I suppose it's. I agree with Miss. Like, you're either going to love it or you'll hate it, and because I didn't enjoy it and found it an uncomfortable watch that's why I wouldn't recommend it, because you only really recommend films you enjoy watching, right? Most people do. So I think that's why. And I think watch The Lobster. Even though I haven't seen it, that would be my piece of advice. Watch The Lobster. Yeah.
Well, I think you definitely start with The Favourite and then see where you
this is
rest
true.
on
I
that.
keep forgetting you did The Favourite, yeah.
Because The Favourite's odd enough. I mean, The Favourite's definitely odd, but at least it's like, it can be perceived as wacky, I think.
And people can get lost in their like Bridgerton Crown style period drama. Yeah, exactly.
Period stuff, yeah. It's a wacky period romp. I don't know, romp's not the word. So 2.5. Helen?
I think if I was ranking them, I would probably go The Favourite, The Lobster, this, Dogtooth. I would also say that if you've enjoyed the Banshees of Inisherin and enjoyed watching Colin and Barry together on film and that, then you should watch this if you haven't, because this is where it all began for them, and they work together, and it's this kind of slightly strange way that they started work together. But if you're wondering how it all began, come here. So yeah, I'm a 4. I think if you've liked his other works and you haven't seen this one, then you should definitely see it. I originally didn't watch this because I read some reviews that said it was like really, really bad. And I watched it and went, they were wrong. This is great. I'm really enjoying it. So, I was a little bit late to this. I was like, why did no one tell me this was great? You all lied. I was very happy about that. So, yeah, I'm going to say a 4. If you like this other stuff and you haven't seen this one, then you should definitely see it.
Yeah, I'm going to give... let's join you guys in the 4. I think it's... I'm really interested to see whatever film Yorgos does going forward. It won't be run of the mill. I wouldn't have thought. And this is his hardest one to definitely get into. I think I've not seen his Greek language one, so that's setting those aside. Definitely Lobster. I mean, leaning into repeat viewing score, Lobster and Favourite are more repeatable watches of films. But I was definitely glad to see this again. This is my second time, and I was looking forward to it again. Because it did freak me out. Barry Keoghan is a really interesting actor. Barry Keoghan, right from the gate, he's been like a slightly oddball. He's in Dunkirk, but then he's also in like Eternals. And it's always kind of interesting to see how he plays stuff. And it's in Eternals, he's quite an interesting character as well. In that, I think so. I'm always keen to see what Barry Keoghan does going forward. Repeat viewing score, Ms.
How many times does repeat mean? Is this like repeat, watch it twice, 3 times to not miss anything, or over and over and over again?
Well, you've got your benchmark. You'll know the films that you've watched the most, and then kind of weigh up against that kind of thing. And then I think there's also sometimes where there's films that you need to definitely watch it again. Maybe not straight away, but you definitely need to watch again, and then maybe you think, okay, that's it for me. But how much you need to rewatch it kind of weighs into that.
Yeah,
if you can distill that into a score out of 5.
Wouldn't go I'd say a 2. Like I like this film, but I'm not gonna watch it over and over and over again. It's trying to spot anything that you might have missed in what's going on from my point of view.
Sophie,
1.
And you've seen it 3 times as well.
I know. I know exactly.
You've seen it the most out of all of us.
Ironically, yes, but yeah, it's again, like I said, just an uncomfortable watch for me. So I just wouldn't put myself through it again. And I actually had a nightmare last night that I had to like pick somebody to fire from Auddy, and I was like, what the hell? So I didn't pick you, miss.
Thank you.
But yeah, so it was obviously all related to that and having to make a choice. And so I just was like, I don't need this in my life. Take me back to my angels and demons, as you'll find out my one soon.
Helen.
So yeah, this is my second time watching it. I think I only saw it maybe like a year and a half ago. So
oh wow, okay.
I was looking forward to. Well, wasn't really looking forward to it. I was like, going to get to see these weird bits again. I was looking forward to it in a weird way. I don't know how much I'm going to watch it again. It's also over 2 hours, and it does feel a little bit of its length. So a 3.
I'm going to go for 2.5. I definitely will watch it again. And I think depending on the films he's coming out with in the coming future, him being Yorgos Lanthimos, I'll pull it out again. I don't think it'll be a frequent rewatch, certainly. I definitely need to watch The Favourite again, and I need to get back into his Greek language films, get into his Greek language films in the first place, to check out how they compare. But 2.5. I will watch again, maybe twice. Small screen score. Miz.
I mean,
have you seen this in the cinema?
I didn't watch it in the cinema. No, I watched it at home, but I would give this a high small screen score. I think 4.5, like if not 5. Like I don't think it requires a big screen to fully appreciate. I think it's more the soundtrack and the dialogue that's going to freak you out as opposed to the imagery itself.
So which one, 4.5 or 5?
4.5. I don't like giving 5s. It feels too like it's like that's a perfect score.
Sophie.
I think, but the first time I saw it, I just see it in the cinema, and again, I comment on the music because music is just so much to me in a film, and obviously the cinema had like Dolby Atmos or whatever it had, and just hearing those high pitched shrieks and that bass and that double bass come through made it really uncomfortable. I'll keep talking the word uncomfortable because that is the only word I can think to describe this film, but I do think seeing it with that level of sound was quite incredible. So I think you can watch on a small screen, but have a decent soundbar would be my piece of advice, probably, to really
I'd agree with that.
Part of the madness of it. Well, yeah. So I would say,
well, if anyone listening wants to donate a very fancy Sonos Arc soundbar to us, I know which one I want. Yeah. Please get in contact with.
So I would say small screen, probably 3. I'd say.
Okay, because that cinematic experience was so visceral to you.
Yeah, for me, it's what I really remember is just the audio of, and the soundtrack of it through that kind of large speaker set was what made it even more uncomfortable the first time. Sure. The second, guess no better, really.
Helen.
Yeah, I didn't see this at the cinema because I mentioned the reviews weren't that favourable, and I would have loved to have seen it at the cinema. I would have had a great time. I like seeing films like this that maybe challenge people's reactions in the cinema. Because I saw The Lobster in the cinema, and I've seen The Favourite, so this kind of annoys me that I didn't get to see this at the cinema. It's a little bit of a blip. But that said, like, I still had a fairly good time, but I think having watched it with to see other people's reaction and count the amount of people who walk out is always a fun game to play with films like this. So I'm going to give it a 4.
Were people walking out?
I imagine this feels like the kind of film that people would walk out.
Oh, you mean you thought sorry, of course you didn't see it in the cinema.
But it's got that vibe.
You imagine people would have walked out.
Yeah.
At what point?
Maybe when Bob's eyes started to bleed.
I think personally, people would have walked out at the point where Colin Farrell talks about wanking his dad off. There is no other way of shaping that. And I think that's when I would have been like, let me share a secret with you about when I wanked my dad off. I was a bit like, I'm just not here for this anymore. I'm just not here for this type of dialogue. I'm not there. Like, that is probably where most people would have walked out, I think.
I just don't see that many people walking out of films. Maybe I'd just go...
I've seen a few recently.
Have you?
Yeah, and it's like, they would have paid at least like £13 to see this, and it's like, yeah, you only even got like 20 minutes left, but it was just enough. It was too much, I think. It was the triangle of sadness. So if you know anything about that, then maybe that kind of like gauges it. And the most recent Cronenberg, so he's still got it.
I guess maybe then it's just well, it's a sunken cost fallacy. If you pay 13 quid and you think, look, 20 minutes is up, I've had enough, let's just move on with the rest of my life, then that's kind of fair enough.
I think people
I've never walked out of a cinema.
I think people walk out of cinemas when the trailer has very much misled them as to what the film is about. And that's happened with a few trailers. I think this might have actually been a film where I saw the trailer in another film and thought that looks really good. And then when I saw it was nothing like the trailer had kind of interpreted to me, or maybe I'd made that assumption. So that's probably why I was like, what's going on? What's happening? Because I think the trailer had made it maybe a bit more Hollywood than it actually was, if I remember rightly.
Yeah, I think I just remember this was his next film, Yorgos' next film, and thought, well, I'm going to watch that. That's fine. Sorry, small screen score, Helen.
I said 4.
4. Yeah, I did see it at the cinema as well, and I do agree with the kind of discordant strings adding to the overall freakiness of the atmosphere. Though I think yeah, the rewatchings on the small screen at home was perfectly fine. I do have a soundbar. It was lovely. I do recommend the Sonos Arc soundbar if you have it.
Going to get that sponsorship for you guys. That's what I'm doing. I'm working straight to Sonos.
I don't have
one.
So yeah, I'm going to go for a 4 because I mean it was good in cinema. I think I went by myself to watch it, and it was a nice kind of a freaky experience for like a Sunday or Saturday afternoon. It would have been. Engagement score, Ms.
I'm going to go back on what I said and actually just give this a 5 because I wouldn't put this film on unless I'm going to finish it. Like it's not the kind of film I'm going to put on to watch a bit of. It's very much focusing on what's being said and what's going on, and like it's quite an intense ride that you're getting on. So you're going to finish it.
Yeah, Sophie.
3. I think maybe, like, as in, you know, again, like Miss said, you can't kind of just watch it in the background like you can with some films. You have to be engaged with it. But I think I just at certain points I did want to walk out my cinema of my front room. At certain points I was like, I need a break. I need a tea break. I'm watching this for the 3rd time. It's just, it's good. It's fine.
Helen.
This time round, I was kind of like having a little bit of a scan of trivia and reading some Letterboxd reviews of it. So balancing that with my higher first time with slightly lower, it comes in at a 4 for engagement.
Yeah, I'm going 4.5. I think it's certainly the first time we have no idea where it's going. And like I say, Barry Keoghan's just kind of set the template of what's going to happen in the film. If he doesn't obey the rules, you're kind of like, is this? Are his eyes going to bleed? Is that what's going? Oh yeah, okay, yeah, his eyes are bleeding. Fucking hell. So it was. You had no idea where this is going to go. So I was fully in it. Slight decrease because it's the second time I watched it, so I knew where it was going to go. But I think it's still very an engaging film. So that gives 4.5. That gives an overall score of 3.46875. I thought it was going to be slightly higher than that, but I think that's fair because, it's a hard film to repeat view, I think. Guys, let's head to Twitter. Everyone who's listening, if you don't follow us on Twitter, please do. We are at FlixWatcherPod. And follow us because we do talk about films on Netflix in general and other films. And also, before we go into record, we put a little tweet out asking for you guys to give your comments, and we'll give you a shout out on the films like this. So look out for a tweet saying something like this. We're reviewing Killing of a Sacred Deer with Pau Tutron and Ms. Trujillo. Is that how you say it?
Trujillo. So very close.
Trujillo. We'll talk about which your Spanish dialect there later on from Auddy shows. Have you seen it? Tells your thoughts and score out 5 stars for a shout out on Flixwatcher. And we had a couple of responses, one a bit more in depth. So do you want to take the first one, whichever one takes your fancy?
Yeah, I'll start with the one I've got at the top, which is Lee Thomas. Deliberately strange performances for a unique filmmaker made for an odd but interesting movie. Prefer Lobster and Favourite, but I'm never bored watching Lanthimos stuff. 3.5. Lanthimos.
Yeah. So if you need to watch The Lobster, then let us know when you watch it. Do you want to take the double David Trumbull, Sophie?
So I've got David Trumbull, who said, a movie featuring a gifted cast and handsome style that I sadly despise with a rare passion due to the creative choice to code Barry Keoghan's character as being on the spectrum. Yeah, this is what we were talking about earlier. As offensively awful and showy performance that I blame both actor and director for, one of 2 tweets. My partner's son is neurodiverse, and believe me when I say they are fully aware of the harmful tropes filmmakers casually employ, a pretentious and, oh God, I hate this word, perennial stereotype for all the movie's avant-garde stylings amounts to simply, they're pretty creepy, huh? 1.5 stars. Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's something I picked up on as well. I thought they kind of shape him as this. He reminded me a bit of that Tilda Swanson, who we'll be talking about in a bit. Let's talk about Kevin, that kind of character. Do you know what I mean? They kind of really like to trope these kind of like, they never say they're neurodiverse, but they kind of, insinuate due to their lack of emotional resonance that they are, unsettled in some way or on a spectrum somewhere. I feel that can, lead to a trope of being a bit like, are they all weird? Are they all, American gun high school killers or whatever? And I feel that's quite uncomfortable. So that's where I thought, when I first saw that performance, I thought, oh, it's a bit awkward.
Yeah, I can see definitely where David's going, and I do have small experience with neurodiverse people, and I think I just need to understand more about where he's coming from with this, because my initial thought was that all the actors are playing the same kind of are acting the same kind of style. So if there is in my mind, if there is something again if there's something to talk about with the neurodiversity, I think maybe it's something that applies to all the acting rather than Barry Keoghan specifically. So that's why I'd like to understand a bit more about what the thoughts are there. I can see what he's saying, but I think it applies to the whole cast, not just Barry or the way Yorgos asks his actors to act, because then it applies definitely to The Lobster as well, not just to this. So yeah, there's probably something to dig in there a bit deeper. David Trouble has been on our show before, so maybe we'll bring him back and ask him a bit more about it. But thank you very much, Sophie and Miz. It's been great to talk about Killing of a Sacred Deer. Has it? I don't know. Yeah.
It's certainly been interesting and uncomfortable for Sophie. It's been interesting. So sorry about that.
Yeah.
Well, that's exactly that's why you chose it, Miz, right?
That's it. Sorry, it's specifically to give you nightmares.
But they always say, don't they, that films are meant to make you feel something, whether it's really uncomfortable or great joy or freaked out. And so in that way, it's a successful film because it's made me feel something. I'm not numb to it. I'm just done with it. Not with anything. So yeah, that's made me feel something. So yeah.
Well, can you sign us off, guys, by saying where we can find you online and say goodbye to listeners?
Yeah. Bye listeners, that sounds really weird, but I'm Sophie, but you can find me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Pouchatron, and also check out Auddy.co and Auddy shows on Twitter as well. And if you have a podcast and you're interested in learning a bit more, find me on Twitter and hit me up.
Miz?
And you can find me on Twitter at Ms_Trujillo. You can find that via the Flixwatcher Twitter. That's probably the easiest way to find the spelling for that. And follow us at Auddy. You can listen to some of the past podcast episodes I've got under Promote the Hell Out of It on Twitter as well.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, guys. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for coming on.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Enjoyed this episode of Flixwatcher podcast? Why not leave us a 5-star review on iTunes? You can also follow us at FlixWatcherPod on Twitter, and we're at FlixWatcher on Instagram. Thanks as always to the mighty people for their mighty, mighty tunes, and Ben from Rockwood Audio for his awesome editing skills. If you're looking to get your podcast edited as sweet as this, get in touch with Ben, and that's Rockwood, ROKK Wood Audio. Tell them Flixwatcher sent you.
You just heard a Stripped Media production.